After the patient is accessed, the cursor will be blinking in the charge header section of the Enter a Charge screen. Specifically, the cursor will be in either the Case field if the patient has multiple cases attached to their record, or in the Start Date field if the patient has a single case. For our example, the patient Abby Doe does have multiple cases. Therefore, we'll have to select which case we want to add charges to. Here we will select the normal case and press the Enter key. Once the particular case is selected, any default information that was entered in the patient screen will populate in the applicable fields. You will see that the provider, JD, defaulted into the provider and B provider fields, meaning this information was previously entered in the patient screen to save you time when entering charge information for this patient. Do note that information can also be defaulted into the fields throughout the Enter a Charge screen via the Charge Screen Configuration preference. You can then enter or select the beginning date of service for the charge in the Start Date field, and then press Enter. The End Date field will automatically populate with whatever date was entered in the Start Date field. Typically, the dates entered in these fields will be the same. However, in some instances, such as for certain hospital charges, where a procedure was performed across a range of dates, these dates will indicate the beginning and ending date of that range. Once the proper date has been entered or selected for the end date, press Enter to advance to the next field. You will notice that we skipped over the Encounter field and went directly to the Provider field. The sequence of which fields are skipped, along with which fields are required, as well as those that have default values, are configured in the Charge Screen Configuration preference area. The encounter number is automatically assigned by the system and is the number by which the charge or charges are tracked for the visit or encounter. You have the ability to enter and modify this number. However, it is recommended that you allow the system to generate this number automatically. In the Provider field, we can enter the provider code for the provider that performed the procedure or search for it by clicking the Lookup button or pressing F3. This field defaulted from the information entered in the patient screen for us, so we can change the provider code if needed and then press the Enter key. In the B Provider field, we can enter or modify the provider code for the provider that will be used for billing purposes for the charge, or search for it by clicking the Lookup button or pressing F3. Do note, however, that once a provider code has been entered into the Provider field, that code will default into the B Provider field. Typically, the provider and B provider will be the same. However, be sure that the correct provider codes are configured when a different provider is billing for the procedure when another provider performed the service. For example, when a physician assistant is performing the service. Once we press Enter or Tab, you will notice that we skip the O Provider and Type field. These fields are used to configure an other provider associated with the charge and the respective type of provider that is. These fields are rarely used in normal charge entry. However, there may be some instances where these fields are needed for tracking or billing certain types of charges. In the Referral field, we can enter the referral code for the referring physician, if needed, or search for it by clicking the Lookup button or pressing F3. Next, in the Facility field, we can enter the facility code for the applicable facility, if needed, or search for it by clicking the Lookup button or pressing F3. The O Referral and corresponding type fields are used to configure another referring provider associated with the charge and the respective type of the provider that is. These fields are rarely used in normal charge entry. However, like the O Provider and type fields earlier, there may be some instances where these fields are needed for tracking or billing certain types of charges.